You know that feeling when your boss leaves you just drained, undervalued, or constantly walking on eggshells? Well, if that sounds familiar, you're in the right place. We're about to break down some really practical, real world strategies to help you protect your well being and get some control back. So let's get right into it. Okay, let's be super clear here. Most managers are genuinely trying to do a good job, but toxic leadership, it's a real thing. And it really only takes one person to create this massive, damaging ripple effect, not just on the company's bottom line, but on the actual psychological health of every single person they manage. Wow. This quote, it just captures that feeling perfectly, doesn't it? This came from a senior leader, someone you'd think would be totally immune to this stuff. They were describing how their boss made them second guess everything. And that right there, that slow, creeping erosion of your own self-worth, that's the core of this experience. It can happen to absolutely anyone. So let's put a name to it. When we hear toxic leadership, we might picture some movie villain having a huge meltdown. But, the reality is usually way more subtle. It's often like a daily diet of low-level, inconsiderate behavior, right? Unpredictable moods, blaming you for their inaction, and of course, taking all the credit while sharing absolutely none of the responsibility. And all of that, it leads to some very real consequences. The pressure of being in a toxic environment isn't just about having a bad day at the office. It has serious, documented effects on both your mental and your physical health. The toll is it's significant. I mean, research directly links toxic leadership to things like increased psychological distress, anxiety, and even depression. It just chips away at your self-esteem, completely drains your motivation, and can lead to total and complete burnout. And honestly, that is way too high a price to pay for any paycheck. I want to just pause here for a second. If any of this is sounding familiar, the most important thing I want you to hear is this. It is not your fault. These feelings are a documented, predictable result of being in a toxic environment. You aren't imagining it. You're not being too sensitive. This is real. And if you ever feel like you're the only one dealing with this, just look at this number. $23 billion. That's the estimated cost of toxic leadership every single year in the US alone. This just confirms what you're feeling isn't some personal issue. It's a massive economic problem that companies, frankly, can no longer afford to ignore. Okay, so we've defined the problem, we've seen the impact. Now let's switch gears and talk about solutions. The very first and probably most important step is to protect yourself by building an emotional buffer. Think of this as your personal line of defense against all that daily stress. So, how do you do it? How do you build that shield, especially when you're already feeling totally depleted? Well, it all starts by focusing on what you can control. That's how you start to take your power back. All right, the absolute foundation is making your well-being a priority. So let's break this down. Number one, connect. Isolation is a toxic boss's best friend, so you've got to talk to friends, family, or maybe a professional. Don't go through this alone. Number two, nourish. Good sleep, healthy food, exercise. These are your non-negotiables. They are your armor. Third, recharge. You have to literally schedule activities that bring you joy. It refuels your emotional gas tank. And finally, seek a safe harbor. Find a mentor, a coach, someone you trust who can give you an outside perspective. I promise you, these aren't luxuries. They're essential for buffering the real physiological effects of stress. Okay, now for a very specific, very tactical tool. When you're faced with that direct, aggressive criticism, your first instinct is to fight back, right? But that just pours gasoline on the fire. Instead, there's this really cool technique called fogging. Just look at these examples. The whole goal of fogging isn't to agree with the attack, not at all. It's to disarm the attacker by basically refusing to get into the fight they're trying to start. So when they say, "You're useless," and you respond with, "I can see how you might think that," you're not saying they're right. You're just calmly acknowledging their perspective without accepting it as truth. It totally de-escalates the situation and protects your own energy. Building on that idea of protecting your energy, let's talk about reclaiming your space. And by that, I mean creating both psychological and physical distance to minimize your boss's influence on your day-to-day life. So here's how you can actually do that. First, set firm boundaries around your work hours, and you have to stick to them. Create buffer zones. If you have a stressful meeting, schedule 15 minutes of quiet time for yourself right after to just reset. Actively try to reduce contact where you can. Ask yourself, could this meeting just be an email? And finally, schedule positivity. Having something to look forward to, even if it's super small, is an incredibly powerful way to reclaim your sense of hope and control. So where does all this go? You've built up your buffer, you've learned how to de-escalate, you're starting to reclaim your space. The next step is really about making a conscious choice about your future. Look, here's the hard truth, and it's backed up by research and countless stories. People with these deep-seated toxic behaviors, they very rarely change. So waiting around for them to have some big epiphany is unfortunately not a great strategy. But that does not mean you are powerless. While you can't change them, you have 100% control over how you respond and what you choose to do next. All of the strategies we've just talked about, they're all about shifting that power dynamic right back to you. And that brings us to the most important takeaway of all. I'll say it again, no job is worth your mental health, period. So the question I want to leave you with is this. What is one small concrete boundary you can set this week to start taking back your well-being?